Business leaders know the future is already here. The economy is shifting. Non-humans are entering the workforce. Nothing feels certain. SHRM understands those evolving challenges, both in the workplace and the wider world. In this podcast, we'll bring together authors, researchers, executives, and non-traditional experts to help you take on the challenges others haven't yet considered. Because you don't need to be a futurist, you need actionable insights now. You need to be a Tomorrowist. I'm Jerry Wan. Welcome to Tomorrowist, where we explore the trends shaping the future of work. This week, we're imagining what the corporation of the future looks like and how to build it today. In an age of AI and constant disruption, forward-thinking companies are beginning to rethink how they're organized, shifting from rigid hierarchies to more adaptive models. Here to share his expertise in shaping the organizations of tomorrow is Chris Mulh, Global Co-Leader of Operating Model and Org Transformation at AlixPartners. Chris, welcome to Tomorrowist.
Hi, Jerry. Thanks. Great to be with you today.
I'm excited to talk about this. We talk about, on this show quite often and just in our daily discourse about how technology and then all these things are impacting how we work. And, we don't talk about this, right? Because we assume that corporation structures and how we work or how we are organized is one of these things that we don't see as malleable as perhaps it can be. So excited to learn through this conversation how we go. In your role as a managing director at AlixPartners, you've worked with businesses in all types of different industries on transformation. Even our own research here at SHRM notices that for CHROs, 30% of them, in fact, they ranked org design and change management amongst their biggest focus for this year in 2025, which is the second highest priority. And so we know leaders are thinking about it and wanting to get ahead and trying to do today what we can do best for tomorrow. What are some of the most common pitfalls organizations face when they start to think about redesigning their structures for the modern challenges?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jerry. I think there are three things that come to mind. I think one is culture. I think what happens is in these businesses, the businesses of today, the legacy businesses that aren't built AI native, I'll say, you've got processes and rituals that have formed and given people successful careers. And now we're talking about taking those and completely changing them and in a sense, tearing them up and starting with completely different processes and rituals that have AI embedded. And so from a cultural perspective, it's a really hard thing to manage through. And so I think that's a big one that we're seeing. Second is leadership. I think from a leadership perspective, you've got these people who got in their seats the traditional way with the traditional processes and a traditional mindset. And if they're not willing to break kind of those paradigms in the ways that they think and the way they operate, then the business isn't going to transform because everything starts with the executive team. And if they're not pushing this and driving it and building and rewarding it and building that into the fabric of the way that the business is running through the transformation stage, they're going to fail. And then lastly, hierarchies. And I think we'll probably talk a lot about this today, but old organizational structure with the kind of siloed pyramid structure, it's rigid in nature. And when we're talking about bringing AI and technology into organizations and redesigning the operating models, when you look at a business, many of the core processes that each business, regardless of industry, is using to drive, their sales, their customer interaction, their R&D, these are things that are cross-functional in nature. And if you've got these rigid siloed structures and you're trying to embed AI in processes that are cross-functional, it can get really bureaucratic quickly and bog down the pace of change, which is the last thing you want. You need this transformation to be nimble, agile, flexible, rapid testing, rapid failure. And you're not able to do that if you've got this cloud of bureaucracy sitting over the top of it with multiple levels of approval from multiple departments and heavy oversight and steering. You need to eliminate that and set up more of a network structure, which we'll talk about today, because that's going to be the unlock to get this to be as nimble and agile as possible.
Yeah, I think based on your experience and what you've shared, and again, the conversations that we've had on this show, and then just a lot of business leaders are talking about how do you sort of at least nudge away and to even ask certain questions on, hey, we always say we've always done it this way, why fix it if it's not broken? But also sort of trying to rethink of if we were to restart this organization today from scratch, would we still build it this way? And also build it sort of in a future-proof mindset, knowing that the technology will continue to change and then change at a quicker pace. Let's talk about the idea of the organization of 2030, which from a future perspective, Chris, it's only 5 years away, but considering the pace of change, particularly AI and technological change that we've seen even in the last 5 months, we may not know what 5 years looks like. And so share with us your experience and your expertise on what you think the organization of 2030 would look like.
Yeah, and I'll talk. It could be 2030, maybe it's 2035, but certainly it's within the next 10 years. I think what's going to happen is you're going to see two main themes. First is, I think you're going to see innovator-led organizations. What do I mean by that? So let's think about a startup today. You've got a VC, you start up, you're founder-led, you develop a product that expands into multiple products, multiple geographies, and at some point, most businesses get too big for a founder and an innovator to run. And they have to hand over the keys of their business to someone who knows how to run a traditional business, because they're built to innovate and they're not built to run this large bureaucratic organization. And it's really not what they want to do, to be honest, in most cases. And what we think is going to happen in the future is a lot of that bureaucratic work, if not all of it, is going to get automated. And so we think companies are going to be able to have effectively, software in a box. You're starting off your sales and maybe you've got one or two switches flipped where AI is helping you do a couple very basic things. But then as that company expands and grows and starts to develop new products, new markets, you're flipping on more switches in that box. So it could be finance switches, it could be product development switches, it could be customer support switches, but the AI is able to take on a lot of that extra work. So instead of hiring people, you're flipping switches and the AI is taking that on, right? And so what happens is as the business grows, the innovators don't have to give up control of their company. They can keep innovating and driving that engine because the rest of the business is AI automated. And so we think the power will stay in the hands of the innovators a lot more than it is today. And then the second thing, which I was getting into a little bit with that answer, is leverage. We think AI obviously is going to provide tremendous leverage. You're going to have 10, $20 billion companies with in the hundreds of employees, maybe in some cases less than 100 employees. And we think that there will be, depending on the industry, every business is a bit different, but in general, there will be sort of three core groups within businesses. So you'll have your innovation side of the business where you've got product managers who are curating hypotheses and constraints informed by agentic AI agent input. Then you'll have designers that direct the AI to explore different concepts and for accessibility. And then you'll have engineers who are supervising the agent output, who are focusing on more of the system architecture and the integration. And so those are sort of like traditional roles that exist today that are going to change in the future. Then you're going to have new roles. So you'll have things like AI product owners who are looking at the agent's behavior and guardrails and making sure those things are in check. You'll have model governance and safety leads who are making sure that the models are properly governed, that the safety constraints are being met that are set by the overall business. You'll have data product managers, and then you'll have platform engineers who do things, make sure that the AI sort of tool chain and the machine learning operations are all working as they should. And so you'll have this rapid, continuous product updating that's driven by this ongoing experimentation, testing, and customer feedback that's almost happening real time. So you've got products out there in the market, they're interacting with customers, you're getting real-time feedback, and your AI agents are able to, recode, iterate, ship new bits of code and new versions and new product updates like almost continually. And so that's the innovation side of the business. Then you'll have a big go-to-market engine, but that's going to look very different than it does today. So you'll have agentic AI developing marketing campaigns that are highly targeted and customized because we have real-time feedback on what customers want, how they're interacting with the product. You can do real-time A/B testing, and the agentic AI can adjust that. And so your feedback on the A/B testing is almost instantaneous, and it's making adjustments to see how it's impacting sales and top of funnel. And then on the sales side, you're gonna have sales reps who become advisors who are really steering the AI. And look, in many cases, your customers are going to be AI, and so your AI sales is going to be selling to your AI customers, and you have humans sitting on top saying like, what's working, what's not, And then at some point, especially in B2B, there's needs to be human interaction. So the sales role is not going away. The salespeople are going to be curating insights that they're seeing based on product capabilities and customer needs. They're going to be co-creating value cases with customers, and they're really managing this multi-threaded stakeholder dynamic situation that's augmented by the AI like co-pilot that's sitting next to them. And so we think go-to-market's going to change, but people are still going to be very, very important in that process. And then if you think of more of like the G&A, the finance, HR, accounting, legal roles, IT, AI is going to run most of that end to end. It's going to be fully automated. You're still going to have humans required to do strategy, the governance and ethics, as we talked about earlier, and really the model break fix. So they're going to be handling exceptions. What's the model doing right? Where's the model going wrong? How do we fix that? And their job is to drive stakeholder trust. So we've got all this AI that's running our G&A. Like, how do we make sure that the executive team and the board and the constituents or customers of what the AI is doing are accepting of the outcome and that it's driving the right results for the business? And so we think that's how businesses could look in 5 to 10 years.
I think it's, certainly a more efficient way. If you look at sort of, a metric that is often talked about is revenue per employee, and the way that you're describing it, and I think even the ways that we're observing it, right, as we see newer companies, develop with AI at its core, or even AI as a product itself. There's a difference, I think, in looking at these organizations that are being built from the ground up with AI infused into every part. And then for most of our audience, for what it's worth, it's not a good or a bad thing. Most of us work for large organizations, historic organizations, longer tenure organizations that already have, not only systems, but lots of people already doing most of these things. And so share us your thoughts on sort of the realities of the difficulties, challenges, and opportunities for large, older, more static organizations sort of rolling back a few things or innovating or to make themselves more nimble. Is that possible? Or, how do you advise organizations that are large, complex, with a lot of humans already embedded into every bit of the process to get to that, sort of the vision or the model of the 2030, 2035 organization that we just spoke about?
Yeah, I think it starts with the strategy. And so you need to take a step back and say, okay, what do we want AI to do for us? And it could be you look at product development. Let's take a software company, right? You might say, okay, well, in our software company, within product development, these are our objectives. This is how we want to use the AI. Within services, this is how we want to use the AI. Same with go-to-market, same with G&A. And so you want to make sure that you've got the right goals across the right core process areas of the business, or functional areas, if you will. And then I think the key is, once you know what your objectives are in each of those areas, what are the right use cases? So what are the processes that could be cross-functional within those areas that we want to start with because they make the biggest impacts? There's the biggest case for change, whether that change is getting a product in a customer's hands faster, whether that change is driving out cost, being more efficient, making our customers happier, whatever it might be. And then take those use cases and prioritize them based on their ROI, and how easy or hard they're going to be to implement. And I think if you start there, and then you take one of those high impact use cases and you drive it home, you build it out, you innovate, you fail, you change it, you iterate, you succeed. When you get that success on that important use case, you're going to start to build that buy-in in the organization. And the ability to do the other use cases that are sort of in the plan is going to increase. People are going to be more on board. They're going to be more accepting. They're going to be more excited. They're going to want to be a part of it, and they're going to help drive it ultimately. And so that's kind of what we're seeing is the biggest unlock. The problem we see with a lot of companies is we got to get in the AI game, and we've got a bunch of people running around doing AI, and we have no idea what the ROI is. We don't know what the projects are that are out there. What are we working on? What should we expect from it? When should we expect that? How do we need to change our operating model based on these projects being completed, right? They're not planning for that. And so if you're thinking about those things up front and you get that proper foundation laid, and then you build some wins, we're seeing a lot of success in companies who are adapting that way, even really, really large, 50, 60, $70 billion companies.
Let's talk about leadership. I think, obviously leaders need to be very mindful in sort of how they approach it. There are, real implications to workforce, retraining, reassignments, and things like that. And so when we think about how AI impacts not only the organizations of the future, perhaps organizations of today, how does that change the leadership roles for executives from traditional to what they need to be learning and adapting to? Not a lot of us, in these roles, learned AI growing up. Obviously, it's all new, and we're sort of learning it together. And the nuance for executives at the C-suite in particular are how to infuse this not only into their day-to-day, but how they can leverage it to help their organizations move forward.
First thing I'll say is the executive team is going to be more important in the future than it is today. When you talk about the CEO, we imagine them being the conductor of the orchestra, right? Where the instruments are the AI, and the people are interacting with those instruments. So the CEO is going to be setting the strategy, like we talked about, with the executive team, and then really continually evaluating and challenging some of the scenarios that the agentic AI is bringing, and the proposals, and saying which of these are right, what's the direction we want to move in, breaking ties, making sure that the AI is doing what it should be within the guardrails and policies that the executive team needs to set. And so that's one of the main roles. Mm-hmm. You're going to have also new roles, right? You're going to have a chief AI officer. A lot of companies already are standing those up, and especially the AI native companies, just making sure that AI is performing as expected, it's operating ethically. And then when you start thinking about some of the other executive roles, like I said, they're probably going to become even more important. So your GC or your chief legal officer is going to be critical for setting responsible AI policy. I mean, we've had so much conversation in the world about responsible AI. This GC or chief legal officer, that's their job, is to make sure that we've got that established and we're adhering to it. The people and the models. And then the CHRO, I mean, you can imagine, or the chief people officer, you've got, first of all, this massive transition, right? Where you're disrupting the culture, you're disrupting these traditional processes, rituals, jobs, and you're moving AI agents in. So jobs will go away, jobs will get created. People need to change skill set, right? To be able to remain relevant in the workforce. And the CHRO needs to be at the helm of all of that. Not to mention, once the AI is up and running, they're now managing a blended workforce. So you've got your digital workforce and you've got your human workforce, and you've got to make sure that those two are working together as they should be. And then you've got your CFO. So your CFO needs to make sure all the financials are calculated and reported correctly. making sure that the AI that's doing all of that work is doing it as expected, because at the end of the day, they still need to sign the financial statements, and they're accountable for those. And so if there are errors happening in the AI that's underneath that, just as there might be today with humans doing some of that work, they need to make sure that they're checking for all those errors and mitigating against any problems. But then they're also leading the capital strategy. They're driving investor trust, and they're dealing with the risk governance of the model. So all of those roles are critically important to the future, and we see a skill set shift for those leaders as well. They're going to have to be adaptable and be able to have some technical literacy that they might not have today.
I think one of the things that many people, regardless of whether they're executives or even entry-level folks, are thinking about today, as AI has changed fundamentally how we view and do work, is how do I make myself irreplaceable or less replaceable in a world where it seems like roles and functions that were once thought of as untouchable by AI are proving us wrong? What are some skills or talents, tools, things can folks be thinking about learning, developing so that we become less replaceable and become more valuable in the organizations of the future?
Yeah. So I think first it's going to be thinking and problem solving. And for me, this is the most important. You already are seeing people who are using LLMs at work every day, and then just type in a question, they take the answer, and they're sort of spitting that out. It's happening in schools. It's happening all over the place. And they're not thinking about, does that answer make sense? Is that really answering the question? Is it considering all the right variables, et cetera? And so we think that, like, looking back at education, right? Engineering degrees or liberal arts degrees that teach people how to think, how to take complex problems, break them down, solve them, talk to people about them at a foundational level, and really, like, drive execution and solution. That's critical. And so those are the types of educations that we think people are going to need to be successful in the new workforce. Next, it's less education related. It's more human related. People are going to need to be adaptable, flexible, and really have a desire to learn. I think everyone's roles are going to be changing rapidly over the next 5 to 10 years. If you're not saying, hey, how do I get smarter? How do I get better? How do I use AI to help me, while also being flexible and adaptable and understanding that the role I have today might be completely different than the one I have tomorrow, I think people who aren't making that transition mentally aren't going to be successful. I think EQ is another one. And it sounds weird. It's like, hey, we're putting more, AI and automation. Like, why would EQ be important? One is that we were making this transition, right? And so during the transition, obviously EQ is important because you're dealing with people's egos, their careers, their lives, and trying to help them make this transition. And so that takes a lot of EQ. But once the agents are up and running, a lot of what humans are going to be doing, as we talked about earlier, is the oversight and interaction. And their work's going to center around conflict resolution and rapid change. And so if you're not capable of understanding the conflict, dealing with it, like, that's going to be people's entire jobs. And so if you don't have high EQ, all of these humans who are using AI agents need to interact with each other to be really successful as a business. And if you're not able to do that with high emotional intelligence, you're going to have problems. And so that's a third. And then I mentioned this one earlier, but data and technical literacy. I think everyone's going to need to have some level of data and technical literacy to be successful.
We talked about strategy earlier, and I think it's a fascinating one, right? And I think even as individuals, as almost daily, there's a new AI tool with new versions, one saying we're better for this and we're better for that, and you should use us. In the B2B AI world, the limits or the options seem limitless in terms of new tools, new companies being developed saying, I am your all-in-one best tool for innovation. This is bombarding the inboxes of executives who are being pitched the next big thing. As you mentioned, they have to be very careful in how they not only look at what they use, but what programs they use, what partners to go along with, in an age where things are going to continue to evolve so quickly. What is some, what's some good advice for folks as they consider what to go in on, how intense to go in on? I think there's some, wise advice to sit back on the sidelines and observe before you jump into things. But FOMO kicks in, and as you watch the headlines of yet another company using AI to get ahead, how do you balance that, um, approach for executives, and then what are some tactical strategies to help them decipher and to decide what to go in on and what to wait and see?
I'll go back to what I was saying earlier. I think, and I'm not going to belabor the points, but I think you got to start with the strategy. You have to say, like, where do we want AI to interact? What do we want the objectives to be across different parts of our organization? And then you've got to pick the right use cases to go after. So I already talked about that. The thing that I think, and it relates to the exact question you asked, which is like, you've got basically inboxes flooded with people trying to sell point solutions. When you go back to that idea of a chief AI officer or your chief technology officer, I think it's very important to think about, how do I bring, like, I can't just go build 75 or 7,500 point solutions, right? With different software that doesn't talk to each other. And so how am I going to architect this whole thing together? So one of the things that we've been doing a lot with clients lately is talking about the concept of a unified data layer or a data activation solution. And so the idea there is, we think it's a thing of the past for companies to go on a 10-year ERP consolidation or this large data warehouse consolidation. We've got technology out there like Palantir, like Snowflake, even Databricks, other things out there that can sit on top and connect to all the different systems that companies have today in their disparate system landscape. And in that layer, which, by the way, in many cases is read-write. So Palantir, for example, you can do read-write. You can build applications that are AI-enabled, and you can link all of those systems and data together virtually. So you don't have to consolidate your systems. You don't have to consolidate your data. When I need data from 17 different systems to make a decision, I use that UDL or that DAS layer on top to go in, grab what I need, and serve it up to me so that I can make the decision I need to make. You can create custom applications. It's a really, really powerful tool that we're working with companies to implement. And so I think as companies are exploring all of these point solutions, you've got to be thinking, like, what's my connectivity layer? How do I bring all of this under one master orchestrator from an AI perspective that can tie everything together and allow me to continue to iterate and develop new things, new capabilities, new applications as I progress on my journey. And so that's a really, really important architectural consideration that companies need to be making.
Along the same vein, give us your thoughts on, too much, not enough governance. Give us your thoughts on that. Again, you want speed, but you don't want to be too quick and then, put yourself at risk of not thinking things through.
Exactly. I think this is one of the biggest challenges, like we talked about earlier. You've got to be able to set your objectives and your guardrails, and then set the teams up who are working on these solutions to run as quickly as possible. And so they need the psychological safety to be able to take risks. They're going to fail. We want to celebrate and learn from those failures, rapidly iterate and improve. It all goes back to essentially like the Agile mindset. What you don't want is, let's say you've got a product development process. You've got your engineers, your R&D, your product management, but you've also got your finance team involved, your marketing and your go-to-market team involved, and probably 6 or 7 other traditional departments or functions that we have in a business today. You can't have executives from each of those areas as a steering committee, and then representatives from each of those areas who are doing the work, but then they need to get approval from their leader for the piece that they're working on. And then all the leaders need to come together. No, it's not going to work. You've got to take the team that knows that process the best. You've got to set some guardrails and objectives for what they're doing. And then you got to let them run. And you've got to do it in an agile way where they're coming back, running sprints, sharing what the output and outcomes are of what they're pulling together, so that that steer committee can make sure that it's on track, it's achieving the results it needs to achieve. But you can't get in the way of the progress and the speed, because if companies are doing that, these AI native startups that are coming after every industry right now, including consulting, they're gonna eat your lunch, because that's not how they're built. They're built, how can I use AI to solve the problem with as few people as possible? And that's the way they're moving. And they're trying to develop and iterate as quickly as possible. And they're using AI to do a lot of that coding, a lot of that testing, and a lot of that, even the market testing and customer need testing. So you've got to be nimble, you've got to be agile, and you've got to be quick.
So for many of our audience members who are at that executive level, particularly CHROs, they may be asked to, recommend AI tools or softwares or things. You, in your role as a consulting firm, have that role too. What are some of the things that you do at AlixPartners to vet these tools and to get in the habit of always trying new things, and put that into the context of giving our audience members advice to, again, have a good sort of lens through which you can decipher what you recommend as tools that can be further implemented throughout a large organization?
Yeah. So a couple of things I'd say. One, there's a place for the off-the-shelf tools for sure. There's no doubt. We have an AI and data team, but we also have all of the rest of our consultants who are constantly sitting in on sessions where companies like Stack AI and Palantir and a bunch of different solutions are sharing with us, hey, here's what we can do, this is what we're capable of, et cetera. And then we're trying to use some of those at clients to see, what works, what doesn't work, what we think is best. But I also think companies need to sit back and say, like, where do I want to buy a software that does something versus where can I build something myself? So take Stack AI as an example, right? That gives people who don't have the coding ability and skill, the ability to create applications with no code, right? And so where are there things where you can use a software and people who know the process but don't know how to code can build something themselves or with maybe the help of a small development team really easily and quickly. And it might be a better idea to do that than to go out and buy something off the shelf. Or where might it be best to just use like an easy LLM, AI agent and kind of, get that installed into a process or in a couple of the process steps to do what you need it to do. And so I think it's really about, start with the use case, figure out what you want to do, and then look at the landscape of solutions. Do we think this is better to build ourselves? If we are, is it an application? Is it just using an LLM? How do we embed that into the process? Do we need to go out and buy a software? Or there's a fourth option. It's like, what if we hire a large business process outsourcer like a Genpact, an Infosys, a Wipro, or an Accenture to come in and take that on and drive all the automation for us? You're going to give up a little bit of the control and a little bit of the cost savings because they need to make their margins, but they're getting really, really good at these things. And so that needs to be an option on the table as well. And so I think our advice is we're testing these things. We're piloting all four of those on a regular basis. We have teams who can develop AI and code things and design things for clients. Particularly if it's stuff that's like the lifeblood of the business and there's not really a software out there that can do it, and you've got proprietary ways of thinking and doing things, we can code that. But at the end of the day, like, our job is to make sure that companies understand the different options and are figuring out which one of those options is right for that use case. And then making sure that no matter which options they choose, all of that's orchestrated underneath an architecture that makes sense for them going forward.
One thought I want to share with our audience is, the goal of this conversation with Chris is not to overwhelm you. It is not to make you feel that you are, falling behind, because certainly I think, it is easy and understandable for a lot of folks to feel overwhelmed with the amount of conversations around AI that we have. And then some of these changes, will be fast. Some of these changes will be slow. But I think one thing that we can agree on is that change is necessary. Our learning, our testing, our trying, and our implementation. And so leave our audience with this final thought, Chris, or sort of a charge. Give us one thing that our audience members can do today to better equip themselves, to better be prepared for the organization change, the transformations that are going to happen in a more connected AI world tomorrow.
The word I would use is explore. Get out there, get your hands on this technology, see what it's capable of, see what it's not capable of, what are its limitations, understand it, get used to working with it. And the people I've seen most successful and the companies I've seen most successful are those that do that. And I can't say enough. I remember sitting at a desk a year and a half ago thinking, I don't understand what this AI stuff is. What's this chat GPT thing? And I started playing around with it. And it's hard to explain before you start, using it and testing it and seeing what it's capable of and how fast it's improving. It's hard to understand how to use it. Once you start using it, your mind just expands. Oh my gosh, 80% of my day is spent doing things that I hate doing. Like it's busy work, it's bureaucratic things. Like this can take all of that work away from me and free me up to do all of the strategic thinking and the fun things that I want to do. And so I think the World Economic Forum, I'm going to probably get the number on. They published something saying that like the net impact of this isn't going to be the world loses, hundreds of millions of jobs. It's like it's going to be a positive. I think it's like a $9 trillion impact on the economy, and the number of net jobs is going to go up. What I think is going to happen is we're going to end up with businesses are going to have fewer people, but we're going to have so many more businesses. And, the number of companies that exist in the world, the number of products that exist in the world are going to go up by a factor of 10, maybe a factor of 100 over the next 5 to 10 years. And so with the volume of businesses, and you're going to be able to have that because AI is your leverage, right? With that volume of business, you're going to have so many jobs in all of those companies that are requiring people to be able to interact with the AI, but they're going to be able to do things that are a lot more fun and exciting and thoughtful than what they do today. And so my parting thought is don't be scared, embrace it, experiment with it, and ride it to the future where I think we're all going to be a lot happier with the work we're doing day to day.
Amazing. This has been a very educational and insightful and inspiring conversation. Chris Mulh, partner and managing director at AlixPartners, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Jerry.
That'll do it for this week's episode. See you next time on Tomorrowist. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please subscribe to Tomorrowist wherever you get your podcast. We also publish a weekly newsletter with in-depth articles and the latest SHRM research to help keep you in the know about the trends shaping the future of work. You can subscribe and find all of our episodes on our website at shrm.org/Tomorrowist. Thanks for listening. And remember, the workplace is changing rapidly. You don't have to be a futurist, be a Tomorrowist.
SHRM.